Cockney gambler Jake Green is eventually released from jail after serving 7 years in prison. 2 years after his release, he and his brother Billy visit one of the most significant local casinos in an attempt to recoup the money that the proprietor, criminal boss, Dorothy Matcha, owes them. He permits Jake to participate in his private game despite the advice of his bodyguard Paul. Due to his claustrophobia, Jake is hesitant to use the elevator on the way up, but when the other bodyguards remind him that they must go 20 stories up, he gives in and uses it while having a panic attack. Jake loses his first wager, which is a chip toss against a fellow player at the table. However, he is doing this on purpose to give Matcha a false sense of security so that when they place the same wager, he wins. Billy and Jake are rushing out of the casino with their bags stuffed with cash when Zach stops them and tells them they're in danger before giving Jake his card. Jake chooses to use the stairs this time, but before he can descend even a single step, he faints and collapses just as the card indicating to take the elevator. Paul hears Matcha's concerns as Jake is taken to the hospital. After serving 7 years in prison, Jake must have wanted more retribution. Accordingly, Matcha instructs Paul to employ the top hitman in the industry to remove Jake. Jake is informed at the hospital that there was not a visible cause for the blackout and that he should return home to rest while awaiting the results of the blood test. Jake takes the bodyguards with him for protection, but as soon as they get there, they're all shot, so Billy heads to his own place. He barely escapes because he stumbles upon a card on the ground that reads, "Pick this up," and he bends over to do just that. Zach arrives in time to save him and take him away, but not before he shoots the driver of the car as he tries to flee. Sorter, the hitman, believes someone must have tipped Jake off because he can't understand how he missed, since he never misses. When Matcha chastises him, he tells him instead that he missed because he felt uneasy. Jake is accompanied by Zach to meet Avi, his partner, who has obtained Jake's medical file through some means. Jake will pass away in 3 days due to a rare blood condition. The men promise to protect Jake as long as he gives them all of their money and complies with their demands, which includes responding to any inquiries they may have. They give him 3 hours to make up his mind, but Jasky, thinking they're playing a joke on him, walks out without saying anything. The same results are given to him at the hospital, but Jaskier receives a second opinion from his private physician, who concurs, believing that the lab must have been funded by Zach and Avi. Jake acknowledges he has no choice but to accept the men's arrangement after threatening him with a gun to make sure he isn't getting paid too. He does this by withdrawing money from the bank. Avi informs Jake that they are loan sharks and that they will be lending Jake's money as they head out for a ride. When Avi visits their first client to collect the money, he demands to know everything Jake has ever done with Matcha. Matcha once employed the Eddies, 3 extremely dim-witted men. They knew Jake was a good player and called him to replace their lost card man before a major game. Jake wanted to say no, but he had to agree to protect Billy's family because they were in danger. But as the game went on, the other men at the table started making fun of Jake and his mother. That didn't sit well with Jake, so he started a shootout. The money vanished, the electricity went out, and the next thing he knew, his name was mentioned and he was being questioned by the police. They threatened his niece and unintentionally killed his sister-in-law. Jake withheld from the police that Matcha was the game organizer and had received a 7-year jail sentence. Matcha used the Eddies as concrete because, at some point during that period, he became upset with them. Jake is sent to stay at a motel by Zach after he has visited several clients. In the meantime, Sam Gold, the ultimate figure that all other mob bosses aspire to be like, is visited by Matcha and Paul. But Gold never gets visitors. Instead, they have a meeting with Lily Walker, his advisor, who consents to help Matcha arrange a deal for Powder. She also reminds him that Gold is not fond of second chances or publicity. A while later, while playing chess with Avi, Jake gives Zach and Avi more money before being questioned about his time in jail. Jake made the decision to spend 7 years in isolation after being given the choice between 14 years of regular time and solitary. He shared his cell with 2 other long-term inmates, a con man and a chess master, who had no communication but knew everything about one another. Jake learned the formula to win any game in the world from the 3 of them, who would communicate for the first 5 years of his sentence by writing messages on library books. Jake was promised to accompany the 2 men as they planned to break out of prison, but when the time came to actually leave, they vanished without saying anything and left Jake behind after learning that the two men had stolen all of his money and had only left a note that stated, "You can only get smarter by playing a smarter opponent." Jaker began, applying the formula to win big at different casinos after being freed 2 years later. Jake keeps working as the days go by, seeing different clients and spending his own money. Although he should also threaten them if they don't pay, he can't bring himself to harm helpless, pleading people. In the meantime, Zach and Avi are chaining a wall's edge to a truck so that when they pull, the wall will break and the safe will be taken from the other side. When Matcha discovers he's been robbed, he sends Paul to find the powder he promised Lily in this safe, no matter how long it takes. Paul visits their rival, Lord John, the kingpin of the Triad, who agrees to give them the powder at such short notice, but only at an exorbitant cost. Avi, Zach, Jake, and their group head to the hotel where the exchange is scheduled to take place. They slip into a room next to the thugs and use sleeping gas to blow a hole in the wall and put John's and Matcha's men to sleep. Subsequently, they pilfer both the cash and the powder, fabricating a story to suggest that Matcha was the one who robbed John and vice versa. After a while, Jake receives a call from Billy informing him that Jake needs to leave the area because, according to his inquiries, Zach and Avi are so dangerous that not even gold would touch them. Jake disregards the advice and returns to his job, where he is expected to shoot a terrified client. Just before Avi knocks him out, he realizes the gun is empty, so he tries to shoot Avi instead of saying no. A few hours later, when Jake awakens in the motel, Avi calls to tell him that he's made it through his 3rd day and that he needs to get checked out. Jake visits his doctor after receiving a visit from his niece and Billy, who leaves him a gun just in case. The doctor confirms that Jake is fine and that the diagnosis was incorrect. When he calls Avi to demand an answer, all he gets in return is the phrase, "You'll have to wait." Matcha gives Paul the order to kill Jake because, in the meantime, Paul has been gathering information, and Jake's name has come up in all the issues his men have been having. Avi and Zach are there to greet Jake upon his return to the motel, alerting him to the fact that Matcha's goons are waiting for him inside the room. The men pursue Jake as he flees, but he escapes them, especially after one of the thugs accidentally shoots himself. When the other crooks discover the body, they assume Jake is the culprit. When Jake visits Avi and Zach at work, they admit that they've always known Jake lied to them about his previous agreement with the Eddies. Since Jake's actions led to Matcha firing them, those 3 clowns had been waiting for him to be released from prison in order to kill him. He made the Eddies an offer to save his life. He would give them 3% of any money they lent him each month in exchange for his life. It was only Eddie who said yes the first time. However, they all wanted to be in, this time for 4%, when they saw that he had kept his word. Actually, Jake wasn't losing any money because he was paying each Eddie with another Eddie's money. They eventually ran out of money to lend, so they borrowed from Matcha, who soon developed a fascination for the Eddie's enigmatic moneymaker man. Jake decided to go on a vacation with his brother and niece after using the formula to gamble and become wealthy. And that's when Matcha killed the Eddies for not paying him back. Speaking of Matcha, his goons stop by to inform him that Jake has escaped while he is enjoying dinner at a classy establishment. Sorter shoots John's lover, who is posing as a waitress, as he leaves the restaurant to pursue her driver. In the midst of the chaos, the woman manages to shoot Matcha in the finger before he dies, but his shooting is still off, and he only got to hurt her, not kill her. Sorter is then dispatched to kill Lord John and his men in their hiding place. Returning to Jake, he continues to converse with Zach and Avi as they play golf under the roof. They tell him that nobody ever sees gold because he is merely a personification of greed and an ego. And the only people he has power over are those who invest in him. Gold is not real. Therefore, Jake must alter the guidelines for what he permits to rule him. After that, Jake stealthily enters Matcha's bedroom after withdrawing the remaining funds from the bank and donating them all. Jake acknowledges Matcha as the superior crime lord, apologizes to him for defrauding him of his money, and tells him he has made a donation in his honor before leaving, all while battling the voices in his head that stand in for his ego. Jake rides the elevator, which becomes stuck on the 13th floor, in an attempt to face his fears. He has a mental dialogue with himself while battling a panic attack, rejecting his ego and ultimately leaving the game as a free man. When the elevator starts up again, Jake finds Matcha, who has been driven insane by his own ego, waiting for him on the ground floor with a gun. But Jake is content with who he is and just strolls by, which irritates Matcha since he doesn't understand how someone could not be afraid of him. Realizing how thoroughly humiliated he has been, he starts crying. Paul brings Matcha all the local newspapers the following morning so he can see his name prominently displayed in them. Everyone now believes that the owner of the casino is concerned about the community because Jake was truthful when he claimed to have made a donation in Matcha's honor. Accepting the credit makes Matcha happy, but his joy is fleeting. Paul also tells him that Jake has been playing them all along and that he has the powder. Billy, realizing one of his bodyguards has betrayed him, hides his daughter in the cupboard, while Paul, Sorter, and the rest of Matcha's goons visit him. When he is discovered, the men start abusing him while questioning him because they don't believe him when he claims not to know where Jake and the powder are. Sorter begins to feel uneasy with Paul's increasingly cruel techniques, particularly when they force the girl to emerge from the cupboard after hearing her cry. Sorter kills his fellow henchmen in a methodical and efficient manner, refusing to harm a child in the process. However, he makes a mistake at the end and ends up dead as well. Lily pays Matcha a visit in the interim. She brings him a wreath that Gold sent because he dislikes publicity and is upset that Matcha's name is all over the papers. He goes into yet another panic attack when Lily tells him that Matcha's time is up and he won't get another chance. Jake and Zach are brought to Matcha's casino by Avi, where Avi eventually defeats Jake in a chess match and divulges the final bits of information. He had been the man in the cells next to Jake's with Zach, and they had always wanted to take him away with them, but he had not been prepared to acknowledge that they had been nothing more than fantasies in Jake's mind. Sadly, he doesn't have time to process this because, at that precise moment, bodyguards from the casino arrive to take him to see Matcha, who is accompanied by the girl. Jake assures his niece that everything will be all right after spilling the powder bags on the ground, which infuriates Matcha since Jake continues to act fearlessly even when he is pointing his gun at the youngster. Matcha's ego voices conclude that Jake cannot harm a dead man due to humiliation, so he presses the gun to his head and fires. I appreciate you watching, and I'll see you in the next video.